Megan, welcome back to the podcast. I feel like this is probably our third time having a conversation like this. It's so great to see you plus one again. For people who aren't familiar with you, would you mind filling in a bit about who you are and all the amazing things that you do?
Yes. Just so you guys know, my guest with me is Ella, my daughter. She's 4 months old, and she is still awake currently. Is kind of happy right now, but hopefully we can keep her at bay during the whole podcast. But my name is Meghan Sak-Ocbina. I am a physical therapist and strength coach. I work predominantly online, and so I'm working with people all over the world, whether that's for rehab or performance. I also have a group strength training program called the Form and Function that I am just so grateful for, honestly, because it's allowed me to stay with my daughter postpartum, but it's also just been so fun just to see people all over the world just, gaining a community and getting stronger, feeling better in their bodies. So, yeah, that's me. I mean, I could probably talk about a lot more other things, but those are what I'm mostly known for.
Absolutely. No, you're such an incredible person and you're doing so much great work in this space. And I'm super thankful to still have a connection with you that way because you are just on another level with everything that you do, Megan. And one of the things I've noticed you focused a lot on lately is kind of this kind of, pregnancy and then postpartum athlete, because I feel like that kind of describes you. As you mentioned, you have a 4-month-old daughter now, and you're still able to do some really incredible physical stuff. Some of the things you do, I can't even begin to fathom how you do it, but you make it look easy. And I've started to notice that a lot of the individuals about my age, maybe a little older, maybe they're strength coaches, maybe they're sports rehab providers, whatever it is that way, they're having babies. And then they're like, shoot, how do I go back to where I was before after this? Because things might have changed a little bit. Things might be a little different, but the body is so resilient that you can still find a way back. You can still return to cleaning heavy weight and Olympic lifting and squatting and all those things. It's just a lot of the times athletes and coaches and providers feel a little bit lost as far as how to get from where they're at postpartum to where they want to be. And there's not a whole lot of individuals outside of yourself doing legit good guidance there, in my opinion. So, with that said, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on just kind of where we're currently at as a system in relation to the postpartum athlete that way. Do you feel like we're really providing sufficient enough for them, or where are we at?
It's getting better. What's crazy is I actually found out. So I was working on a pregnancy, like during pregnancy, modifiable strength and conditioning program called Barbell Before Baby, and I actually like scheduled its launch for late August last year. And a week before that, I found out that I personally was pregnant. We had been, trying to conceive, but I just did not expect that timing. So it was crazy timing and just super serendipitous. And I have a postpartum program as well, and if people are interested, I can share more about that later. But it's interesting because I've been talking to other creators and like coaches about this too. And like, if we're posting things online, like on Instagram or whatever, and we just happen to be pregnant, even if it is something that people can be doing when they're not pregnant, your audience might assume it's for pregnancy if you are pregnant. And so you have this kind of weird sense of like imposter syndrome. Like you can't talk about anything that is not relevant to pregnancy. But what I have really come to realize is like I can like connect the dots for people and really make them realize like, yes, obviously pregnancy is different. There are a lot of crazy changes in your body and you can't control all of them. I actually had complications in my pregnancy, which we can also talk about. I was a very healthy person. I had complications. But at the end of the day, you're training like it's not that different, And so if people were to realize that beforehand, they can prepare themselves and be less fearful of movement during pregnancy because there's tons of, coaches out there that are like, you're gonna ruin your core and give yourself diastasis recti if you're, training core during pregnancy. But that's completely false because pregnancy is what gives you diastasis recti, and it's necessary. Oh, you lost your binky, sorry. It's necessary to grow a watermelon in your abdomen, obviously. It's a beautiful adaptation that our bodies actually go through. And people, will have it postpartum for a period, for a long period for a lot of people. And it's all, there's genetic factors, there's strength before and after factors, there's, also just, I don't know, there's tons of things that you can't control. But if you just understand more about like what it is and what the purpose is, um, it's less scary, you know? And I think even a lot of clinicians that are working with the pregnant and postpartum population are unfortunately like not intentionally, but causing like fear during certain movements. And like I was just posting about this morning, like avoiding something does not make it bulletproof. Like avoiding training your core does not make it stronger or prevent like injury at all. I mean, you can't really prevent injury. Let's be real. We both know that. You can stack the deck in your favor, but you know, I think it's really important for women to be training things during pregnancy. And I really think, I mean, obviously this is my only experience, but I think that being strong before and then trying to maintain strength as much as I possibly could during um was protective for both my labor and my postpartum during the so far.
Absolutely, and it's so interesting to hear you say that because I feel like for a very long period of time, the advice that was being given was, "Hey, don't train. Don't work out. Don't lift the weights because it's dangerous or it's bad or whatever that way." When in reality, to your point, I think there's probably more danger to losing muscle strength over a period of 6 to 9 months and then
Yeah,
putting your body through something rather physically demanding than there is to, train maybe with some modifications here and there during that
totally.
time as a way to maintain strength, maintain function, and even just the mobility piece as well. Like, I know some people are obsessed with stretching. I can't quite understand it myself. I don't stretch anymore, and I'm the most mobile I've ever been. That's a hill I'll, tackle a different time, but it's like, I look at the demands of pregnancy and it's like, y'all need a lot of freaking mobility for what you're about to do. So if we stop training that and we start to lose some of that range that we've gained, like I almost feel like you're setting yourself up for disaster later on, unfortunately.
Yes, totally agree. And I kind of liken the whole like don't train during pregnancy thing to like cycle syncing. Are you familiar with that? Yeah. So it's a you know, it was born out of good intention because most women do experience varying just feelings of strength and general well-being throughout the month, throughout different parts of their cycle. And I think there's value in like paying attention to it. Just like during pregnancy, there's value in paying attention to your body and like listening to like, okay, green light, yellow light, red light, like which one am I getting? But giving like a blanket, like this is always bad or this is always good for every single person is just really stupid. So I think we really need to educate people on like the reasoning behind these blanket statements and then the nuance like underlying that. Because like you said, like labor is an athletic event. Well, if you're having a planned C-section, I guess it's less so. But afterwards, the recovery, it's really important to be strong. So no matter how you birth your baby, it's an athletic event either before, during, or after.
Oh, I completely agree, and the other thing, as you were talking earlier, you mentioned a little bit about kind of like our current status of how we go about delivering care, and I found just reading between the lines from what you said a little bit and just thinking about some of the conversations I've had with individuals in the space lately, I feel like there's almost an obsession, especially in the postpartum space, with protocols. They just wanna know, "Hey, what do I have to do?" Sets, reps, and so on that way, when in reality, I feel like this comes back to a more principles-based approach because what, the right exercise is or the right volume is or whatever that way is for one person is gonna be drastically different than the next, and there's so many factors that feed into it, as you mentioned, whether that be the delivery method, their strength and mobility, prior to giving birth versus afterwards, and so on that way. There's so many different pieces to this puzzle, if you will, that way. What do you feel like in your mind are kind of the key principles that outline a lot of the work that you do in the postpartum population that way?
Yeah, so that's actually in my programs. So my perinatal programs, we basically have a list of things that are indicators that you may want to modify. And it kind of also depends on someone's risk tolerance. And in order to have tolerance to a risk, you have to know what the risk is and like what that could imply. So, like for example, a lot of people are really fearful of like coning or doming in their core during pregnancy or postpartum And the reason why those things happen is usually because there's like a pressure, like you're not managing pressure optimally. That being said, you're not necessarily causing damage when those things are happening. And you also have to decide, like, is it worth it for you to potentially be hammering a bad habit or a suboptimal habit, I should say, not bad, a suboptimal habit, or is it more important to you to still be training your core and doing things that you enjoy? Because there is a huge correlation with like postpartum depression being less likely if you are exercising earlier postpartum. So while your body is definitely still changing and adapting, like for a long time, like way longer than 6 weeks, like everyone who's heard the 6 week, 6 weeks clearance for exercise thing, like you can start exercise before that. And also, just because you get 6 weeks does not mean that your body is ready to do all the things. And it'll definitely tell you if it's not. But I just think that we need to understand a little bit more about like what things you want to try to avoid. So like when you're not pregnant, generally you're unaware of these things, but when you are pregnant, you might experience things like, leaking either before or after exercise. That's like fecal or urine or even like flatulence. That's called incontinence. And that is something that is super common but not normal. And you don't if it's happening, it's usually because your pelvic floor is not either not timing properly with the rest of your core, or it's just not quite able to sustain a contraction against the pressure that is being asked of it. So whether that's during a sneeze, which is a huge amount of pressure, or like a squat or something like that. So that's like one of the things that we look for in the program. And it's up to the athlete to be able to recognize that in themselves. Coning or dominating, like I said, not necessarily causing damage, but you may be, creating a habit that you may not want to have in the future if you want to be able to optimize pressure management. Obviously, pain, usually people try to avoid it anyway. And like I said, like pain it's all kind of in the eye of the beholder. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're causing damage. It might just mean that you're not quite stabilizing properly. So, like, I personally had a lot of pubic symphysis pain during my pregnancy from like week 12, which, like, you couldn't even tell I was pregnant at that point. Like, I didn't show for a pretty long time, but my pubic symphysis definitely told me that I was pregnant. And that can happen just when there's like a tension mismatch across the joint, especially because during pregnancy, you have a lot more like ligament laxity in your joints, especially around your pelvis. And for me, like what I did is I still kept training, but I just tried to modify. And the reason why I did that is because it was hard for me to move well where I was hurting. Like I just like I was avoiding it. I was compensating, and that's just not something you want to like personally. I don't think it's really worth training through. What else? If you're feeling like bulging down in your nether region, so like prolapse type symptoms, it's very common, but also prolapse is really interesting because a lot of the time, we need to think about how we're diagnosing it because there's also going to be a factor of like, is someone like actually feeling symptoms or do they just look like they have symptoms? So like a PT or a physician might, diagnose someone with a grade whatever prolapse by like how they look or how they feel, but that person might not even feel any symptoms. Or the opposite can happen where they don't have any objective symptoms whatsoever, but they have subjective like feeling of bulging or heaviness, which is super common postpartum. Um, yeah, those are just some of the things. That was a huge rant. I'm sorry, but those are just some things that we would like kind of want to be looking for during pregnancy, and those might be opt options or give you options for modifying.
Yeah, I'm here for all the rants. Please go down all the rabbit holes because this is freaking great. You mentioned about how, in your own experience that way, you were having some discomfort around the pubic symphysis, and that caused your body to move in a way that was maybe a little bit less than optimal, whatever optimal might mean. I'm curious, what kind of patterns or strategies did you see your own body adopting because of the symptoms that you were having? Does that kind of go along with what you typically see in other individuals as well, or was it maybe a little bit different than what you might typically see?
Yeah, so typically I was getting pain with split stance movements, and interestingly, I would only get them when the right leg was in front and the left leg was in back. I wouldn't get them the other way. And it's very interesting. Like we could probably have another podcast about this, but my left side has some issues and not pubic symphysis anymore, but just like other issues. And I'm kind of wondering if it's like residual compensation, or obviously I have some imbalances anyway, and pregnancy just amplifies everything. So does postpartum. But so those are some of the movements that I would have pain with. I wouldn't have pain with like open chain stuff. So typically, like a hinge would be totally fine, like a unilateral hinge. But if I did like a split squat, or a lunge, that would cause pain. And the other thing that I will say is, I mean, I would say from week 12 through like week 22 or so, it was pretty much every single time I did that, whether it was in the gym or like getting up off the floor, it would be painful and I would, be very aware of it and try to modify things. Whether that was like depth or just like messing around with different cueing and just different pressure on like my foot and stuff. But then after that, it got a little bit better and then it came back. And so I would actually try like, if I felt like trying it one day, I would try it. And some days it would be fine. Like super bizarre. Like you would think that it would just stay and not change until baby came out, which it definitely doesn't change once baby comes out. It stays for quite a while. Like you're still weak postpartum. But like some days it'll be fine. So that's also something that I kind of encourage people is like there can be no rhyme or reason. I've also heard anecdotally, and I don't know if there's any actual research on this, but a lot of women will have worse like pelvic pain, like pubic symphysis specifically, in their first pregnancy versus subsequent pregnancies. And I would imagine that's probably because your body just adapts better, faster, and your brain's less like, oh shit, what's happening? We're falling apart. Because that's kind of what goes on in my head, at least, with different pain and that type of stuff.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It certainly seems like one of those things that if and it's interesting because this has come up before where once it's happened once, it's easier the second time, third time, and so on that way. And I think the other thing that really sticks out to me is like you mentioned, everyone's different. There's not always a rhyme, reason, or pattern for things. As a result, I feel like a lot of the times, going back to what I mentioned before about protocols, you can't just rely on timeline progressions alone in the postpartum athlete, right? Like you can't just say, oh, at 6 weeks, oh, at 2 weeks, because everyone looks drastically different. And going back to what we mentioned before, there's so many different other variables and factors that play into that timeline as well that might, push it a little bit further out for someone or might kind of pull it in and actually allow them to advance a little bit earlier that way. Going back through your own experience that way, you mentioned that you were training very early on postpartum. I think from what I remember seeing, I feel like it was within a couple weeks you were back doing some kind of exercise and movement. Now, that might not have been 2 rep max back squat, but you were doing stuff. And I feel like a lot of the times, especially for, the postpartum mom that way, it's like, at least, and this is just my experience by my accord that way. A lot of them feel like if you can give them something that they can do back on their own, that's not just caring for baby, it just seems to go a long way for them, even if it's just 15, 20 minutes a day. And there's a lot of different variables and factors that go along with that, I'm sure, just from like body changes and so on that way. But it certainly seems like reintroducing exercise early is good. For you, what's kind of that early timeline look like? 1 to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and what does that typically entail for you? Any kind of specific movements, patterns, loads, isometrics, anything of that sort?
Yeah, so I'll talk about like kind of what it looks like for me, and then also just like in my programs and with one-on-one clients that I work with, sort of what we use as our guidelines. Um, so for myself, I had an induced birth. I ended up getting hypertension about 30 weeks into my pregnancy, which eventually turned into preeclampsia. So I had to be induced. So I was at the hospital for a couple days. And I remember getting home from the hospital and I just felt like I had like a panic attack when we got home. I think just because it was like, there's 3 days of like, I think I slept like 3 hours in 3 days and I was just running on adrenaline. And then all of a sudden we got home and I had Ella and I was like, oh my God, like I'm supposed to take care of this thing. So, and I just remember my body feeling like it got hit by a train, essentially. Like my pelvis felt like it was like, I think someone else said this. So I wish I could give myself credit for this, but I don't know who it was. But after pregnancy, so during pregnancy, even though you obviously have like changed center of mass and a lot of just different like changes in your body, but you have stability because you have so much tension in some way because it's like the baby is like stretching you out. So like sort of like things are sort of held together in that way. But postpartum, you're essentially just like a burlap sack. Like you're just this like floppy, like gelatinous thing around the core. That's what I felt like. My core felt like jello, literally. And like I would, try to connect to it with my brain, but nothing would happen. Um, so the first things that I did postpartum were like some gentle mobility exercises that I was not able to do during pregnancy because it's really hard to rotate your thoracic spine and you can't flex your spine when you're pregnant because there's a belly in your way. So those are some of the first things that I did, working on just like reintroducing my breath because when you're pregnant as well, your baby is in the way of your diaphragm. So your diaphragm actually moves up like 4 centimeters on average. I'm sure it changes for different people. So just things like that that are really like low level. I started doing Kegels, like just like very gentle pelvic floor contractions. And I had a second degree tear and stitches. I'm just gonna tell you all the things. I had a second degree tear and stitches. And so like that was an interesting experience because obviously it's a little painful doing that. So, I kind of used pain as my guide and I was pretty gentle with it. But those are things that I did, day like 3 when I got home postpartum and kind of continued with that. And what I tell my clients is, like, you wanna kinda just use, those symptoms as your guide. So if you're feeling like heaviness, if you're feeling, like pain, obviously, you might need to modify something. If you're, getting, um, like, increased bleeding, for example, I started taking very short walks about 10 days postpartum. I went with my husband, he pushed the stroller, and we went 100 yards. And I was expecting, like, to be totally fine, and all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, like, things feel different." He's just like, "It feels like gravity is affecting my pelvic floor differently than it would have." So, we turned around and, like, I that was all I pushed that day. It kinda freaked me out a little bit. But the next day I tried it again, it was a little bit better, we went a little bit further. So, kinda just you unfortunately, kinda have to, like kinda like with any rehab, you have to, like, kinda push a little bit to kinda see where your limits are. Because if you just stick with the same low level shit for too long, you're literally never gonna adapt, and you also don't know, like, you don't know, you could be doing way more. So those are things I did early on, and then I'm not gonna lie, I haven't told anyone this. You're the first person. You're gonna hear it first on Dan Braun's podcast. But I did try pull up, like I think it was probably 12 or 14 days postpartum.
Well, this is my favorite exercise, right?
It's like a personality trait for me, a pull up. So I stopped doing them regularly. I don't remember when it was, like maybe 30 weeks pregnant, but I kept like just practicing, just seeing if I still could and still could manage pressure. And I actually like not gonna say, like, it was perfect, but I was able to manage pressure decently well up until the day before I delivered because I knew when I was gonna go to the hospital because there was induction. And then I was able to do it with decent core pressure postpartum, which is just, for me, giving yourself those wins because I felt so not like myself. Like, I've never had, like, a surgery or, like, a catastrophic injury. So birth was definitely the most intense physical thing that I'd ever gone through, and I think people would say that even if they had had, like, a serious surgery before. And so just being able to do that pull-up just made me feel like, "Oh, it's gonna be okay. Like, Megan's still in there. It's gonna be alright, even though you're not sleeping and, like, this little thing yells at you and all the time, and I don't know what the hell she wants," and there was no confidence in my momming yet. That has improved, thank God. But it was just like, I find so much confidence in my ability to work through things in my body, and so that was, like, my first little glimmer of hope. I didn't, like, do them regularly or even, like, lift weights. I think I started, like, week 5, I tried some, like, upper body stuff, but I wanted to see my doctor 6-week postpartum before I, like, really started loading things, and that was mostly because of my incision and, like, the stitches. Because I was just like, I don't know. Is it healed? I'm not sure." Like, I don't wanna, like, screw anything up. So, even as a PT who knows that it is okay to do more postpartum, especially if you are, like, okay with the risks of it and you're watching all your symptoms, and what you don't wanna do is you don't wanna it's kinda like dieting or anything with fitness. You don't wanna, like, satisfy yourself with the short term, just like dopamine hit when you need to work for the long term. So it's slow is fast. Like you don't need to go back to training the way that you did postpartum. And if you try to, your body will probably tell you it doesn't want to, like my body certainly has. Because I'm still breastfeeding, so I still have, laxity. I'm still, she's still waking up 2 to 3 times a night. So my sleep is still disrupted, and I'm with her all day, every day pretty much, and so my time to train just isn't the same. My recovery is not the same, so I'm just sort of taking it in stride and working on what I can. But since 6 weeks postpartum, I have been doing I try to do like 2 compound movements most days, and the reason why I've designed it that way is because she doesn't usually give me that much time. Like, I know a lot of people just, like, wait till nap time, but her naps are kind of erratic. I don't really know how people schedule nap times. I mean, she kinda has, like, general windows, but, like, some days she'll nap for, like, 3 hours twice, and then other days she naps for, like, 30 minutes, like, 5 times, so I don't know. I probably need to read a book or figure it out, but, like, my baby does not nap super regularly yet. So my best bet is, like, she's pretty happy. She's a morning girly like her mom. So, usually what we'll do is, like, I'll either try to sneak into the garage to get a little workout in before she wakes up with the baby monitor as my, like, gym mix. And then, I would say 8 times out of 10, she'll wake up, like, before I even get going, really. And so I'll just bring her in there with me, maybe feed her first if she's hungry, and then put her on the ground with her little thing that she looks at and swats around, and she'll be pretty happy for 15, 20 minutes, and with that time, I can get some stuff done, and I'm really just trying to embrace it, because as frustrating as it is, as someone who like, I fill my cup with movement, like, obviously, it's also my job, like, I need to, like I mean, I know it's stupid to say need, but I need to be posting on social media because that's my primary source of, like, client just, like, acquisition. Sorry, words are hard. Postpartum brain. But, also just, like, filming for clients and things like that, plus, obviously, like, I like to train. Um, but, it's just a unique time, and I know I'm gonna miss it. I know I'm gonna miss all of her little noises, like, yelling at me when she's playing on the ground next to me, and I also think babies, they do notice a routine, and so, like, for her, I want her to realize, like, from literally week 6 of your life, you've been in the gym with mom, and I love that, honestly, as much as I'm like, "Ah, I wish you would just let me do, like, something with a barbell instead of her in my hands," but, I there was a reason why I put all the work before and during pregnancy because I kind of anticipated this to be like this. So, it's you gotta play the long game.
Absolutely. No, it sounds like the more you work early on and the more time you invest into that early on, the easier the big picture, the long game is going to be that way. And I mean, huge hats off to you too for the pull up, just 12, 14 days postpartum that way. I think one of the things that people don't quite understand about something like a pull up and why I love the exercise so much is it's really not just your back and biceps that are involved. It's really everything. And if you don't believe me, try and do pull-ups with like tight braced core versus just like as relaxed as you can be. It's drastically different. And I've yet to see someone, and I could be totally wrong about this, but I've yet to see someone that is insanely good at pull-ups that doesn't have a wicked strong core. The two just
Yeah.
they go hand in hand together. So the concept of you having the core strength and pelvic stability to be doing that so early on, I mean, seriously, hats off to you because it is insanely impressive. And I think the other piece too that, you bring up such a good point in is that a lot of times I feel like all of us in this space are probably guilty of it to a certain extent. We think so highly of movement and exercise and our fitness level because for a long time, it's almost like our identity to a certain extent. It's almost like how athletes view their sport. It's like, hey, that's the thing. That's what they do. For those of us that are strength coaches, for those of us that are in the kind of performance PT space, if you will, I feel like we get into that because of how much we love training. We love the grind. And to not have that same grind for a period of time, it's drastically different. But as you mentioned, it's a different kind of grind. It's like, oh shoot, now I've got to figure out how to function and take care of Ella on 3 hours of sleep. I've got to figure out how to balance Ella and Griff, which I'm sure Griff is like phenomenal with Ella, but still, it's like so many different demands that you're getting pulled in all these different ways. It almost
Mhm.
feels like, and this is just my perspective, it feels almost like it's like game day now. And it's like, hey, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen in quarter one versus quarter three. You just know you're along for the ride and you're hoping for a good outcome at the end of the day.
Yep. Totally, and having a good attitude will make or break you, for sure. I do actually have I have an Instagram friend, her name is Kate. She's also a PT. You should have her on sometime, actually. She and her husband actually just started a cash practice, but she was a month ahead of me in pregnancy, and then we had our babies just 4 days apart. So she's pretty much like I can look forward to what Ella is going to go through by based on what her son is going through, because they're kind of during the same following the same developmental path. But I was just talking to her and some of my other postpartum friends about how like I'm so proud of my body and like everything that it's done. Like if you think about like everything that a woman's body does is insane. But a lot of us feel like sort of fractionated versions of ourselves postpartum because we're being pulled in seven different directions and we're also like unable to really get like predictable and consistent self-care. Um, but like, and while I'm not, I'm nowhere near like where I ultimately want to be with like aesthetically or also strength or function wise, like I am so much more proud of myself now than I ever have been just because I know how much work it was. Like, it wasn't just luck, it wasn't just genetics. Like, literally, we did a hard thing and we're continuing to do hard things and showing up every day, regardless of how much that involves. Um, and I just, it's not really, I mean, it is about me, but it's like more so about Ella now. Like, having a daughter really just solidified my whys for training, and that is to like empower yourself basically. Because really, if you set your mind to something, like as long as you're willing to put in the work throughout day to day, regardless of how you feel and regardless of how, far away from your goal are is how far away from your goal you are, um, you can get there.
You mentioned that phrase, doing hard things, and that's a phrase that I keep hearing over and over and over again. And I feel like in the postpartum population, this has got to be something that's drastically, like, just so difficult for some individuals that way because it's like, well, I already did a hard thing. Like, I literally
Yeah.
just did a hard thing. And
Yeah.
now every day is drastically harder than it used to be, right? Like,
Yeah.
a year ago, life wasn't like this. Now here I am. Like you're already doing so many difficult things on the day to day in a usually less than optimal physiological state. I'll be willing to bet. So it's like,
Yeah.
how do you go about developing this mindset that's basically saying, hey, I'm already doing all these difficult things from maybe interrupted sleep schedule to caring for a baby and balancing all the other things around the house and wherever you are that way, work, whatever it is that way. And now I'm going to make time to do other hard things on top of that, whether that's training or I know some people are obsessed with like ice baths and different things. I'm not going to get into it, but I don't personally like to sit in an ice bath for 10 minutes because it's freaking difficult. It's cold. I don't want to do that. But some
Yeah.
people just embrace the suck a lot better than others that way. From a mindset standpoint, how have you gone about kind of armoring yourself to embrace the suck that comes with some of those difficult things that way?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a very, like, optimistic person, and just kinda able to find the silver lining just because, like, I mean, if I'm unhappy about something or if I don't like something, I'm like, "Okay, can I change it?" And if I can, then I change it or I remove myself from it if I don't like being around it. Um, and if I can't, then, like, you gotta find a way to find the silver lining. So, like, yeah, I don't enjoy having interrupted workouts all the time, but I'm like, okay, it's less likely that I'm gonna get interrupted workout if I only try to do it for like 20 minutes a day. Um, or if I involve her in it somehow, or if I just remember, like, Megan, you put in years of work and you have years of work ahead of you that will be less interrupted than this precious time right now. Like, it's okay. Like, also, I think for me, like, it can be hard having a lot of your life on social media, but also there are women that I have been following for years who have been moms for years, and I watch them like make it work. And I know it's not all sunshine and rainbows because it's not for me and it isn't for anyone. But just like seeing that it's possible instead of seeing that it's impossible, you have to find a way to make it seem like your world is positive, right? And I also really take pride in now becoming one of those people. Like, I want to continue to, like, set an example and show people that it's possible, and, like, people are like, "Oh my god, how do you get your baby to be so cooperative?" I'm like, I don't." Like, "Do you see my story yesterday? Because she wouldn't let me do anything." Or, like, "I don't post every day because, quite frankly, it's exhausting." But it's just I don't know. I think it's really important to show the hard days as well as the easy ones, but the hard days can be really hard to show because it's not like you're like I've never really understood like when people are crying and they take a picture of themselves crying and they post it. Like in some ways I kind of understand it because like maybe you just want to document it and remember like hey, you have bad days, but I also tend to kind of like need a break, a mental break when I have days like that. But I also try to remember like, hey, when I found out that I had hypertension and I had to switch from an unmedicated birth at a birth center with a midwife to a high risk pregnancy that was not even going to go full term, I was freaking upset. And I posted about it and I debated posting about it, but I was like, there's no way I'm going to survive another 7 weeks because that was how long I had until my induction. If I even made it that long, which my doctor told me I might not, there's no way I was gonna surprise, like, showing up on social media every day and pretending like everything was okay, when everything was not okay, like, I was super upset, and when I shared that story, like, I mean, I had thousands of messages, like, I couldn't even get to them all because I was like, "Oh, shit, like, this is not what I don't need more stress right now," but, like, I was so appreciative of, like, my taking a risk to be vulnerable because I had so many people who were like, "Oh, I had that too," or, like, people that I'd followed, like, people with accounts that I would have no idea, because people pregnancy is crazy. Like, your body does not give a fuck if you are super healthy, you do all the right things, because sometimes your body's just like, you're gonna have high blood pressure, even though you've never had hypertension in your life." And actually, it's interesting, my doctor, this is like an aside, but he told me that when someone gets hypertension during pregnancy, when they previously had not, it's actually they usually are a little bit more worried about that person because I guess I'm assuming it's because your body doesn't already have isn't already compensating in some way. So when I developed it, he was like, he didn't tell me this at the time, but at my 36-week appointment, when I was still pregnant and Ella was doing well, he was like, "Oh, yeah, I didn't think you'd make it this far. Like, we'll see you next week when you're induced." And they end up moving it up because my blood work changed after that appointment. But, yeah, I mean, you have to roll with the punches. Ultimately, I was really actually kind of glad in retrospect that I didn't have this, like, sunshine and rainbows unicorn pregnancy because I think it helped me be empathetic to people who felt like they're doing all the right things and, like, still kind of had a shitty roll of their dice. 'Cause that's pretty much how I felt, like, I was like, "Wow, I'm literally doing all the right things," and I still ended up with something that is undesirable and, something that I would be like, "Oh, that's something unhealthy people get," when I would still consider myself very healthy, and it made me check myself because I was like, "Wow, I had a bias." Like, I had low-key judgment of people who wound up with, complications in pregnancy when, I'm just like them, I'm human too, and it also forced me to realize that, like, I can't control everything. Really in pregnancy, it's very hard to control anything, but that was good preparation for labor, it was good preparation for postpartum, and I think it also just has made me a better clinician and coach because I can now relate to people just, like, having to accept something that is not ideal, but also just you still it's like, "What am I gonna do? Change my habits?" Like, "No, I'm gonna continue exercising, I'm gonna continue, like, eating well and trying to manage my stress." Um, but you at the end of the day, you just can't control everything, so expecting that you can is setting yourself up for failure.
It sounds like a lot of it comes back to just the awareness of the situation at the end of the day, awareness of what you can control, awareness of what you cannot control, and then on top of that, going back to some of the things you discussed earlier, the awareness that you have on your body prior to pregnancy, prior to delivering a baby and so on that way versus afterwards. Like you mentioned it even in relation to your walks, like things just feel different that way. It seems like one of the key themes I'm taking away from your story and your insights so far, Megan, is just having the ability to be aware of your situation, aware of what you can control. And even if, unfortunately, things don't go the way that you planned that they would, knowing that, hey, I did everything I could, knowing that, hey, I still put my time in, I still checked the box. I didn't skip a beat during that time because I feel like those situations are a lot more difficult to manage when you look back and you say, well, I stopped going to the gym and I haven't trained in 6 months. And, I'd kind of let myself go from a diet standpoint because someone told me because I'm pregnant, I can just eat whatever I want now and so on that way. And it's like, I think the more grounded and disciplined to your own day-to-day life and habits you stay, the easier the entire process becomes, even if things don't go the way that you want them to. And that could go any one of a million different directions. There's a ton of different reasons this might not go the way that you want it to. It's just a matter of, hey, am I still the same person? Am I still kind of going through life the same way that I did before? And if it's different, that's okay. It's just a matter of what's different and why is it different? Have you completely lost your sense of self and just who you are as a person? Because I'm sure that happens as well. And I'm sure that there's plenty of people out there that can help you with that. It's just a matter of understanding those things and being aware of those things so that if something does come up, you can at least get interventions and get resources and help from people that know the space a lot better. And I feel like if you lack that awareness, if you lack that kind of metaphorical internal check engine light, for lack of a better way to put it, you just start driving and keep driving and keep driving, and eventually the engine blows up, and you're like, "Well, no idea why that happened," when in reality,
Right.
the light was going off 5,000 miles ago. So I think
Totally.
that concept of awareness, I mean, it's essential for everyone, athletes, people, whoever, but I feel like it's especially important in this population as well. And I mean, in some cases, I almost feel like there's probably some hyper awareness because it's like, if Ella makes a noise, you're probably like, what was that? Is she okay? Like almost like guarded up in a sense. Whereas again, 8 months ago, that probably wasn't the case. I just
Yeah.
feel like everything changes in relation to the situational awareness in this case.
Yeah, and moms will get this, like, I will be, like, worried about my baby if she's making noise, and I'll also be worried about my baby if she's not making noise. Like, every night newborns are really loud. Like, when they sleep, they're making, like, all sorts of, like, pterodactyl noises and, like, train noises, squeaking, wheezing. It's, like, super bizarre. I had no idea. But then when they're quiet, you're like, "Why isn't she crying? She hasn't woken me up for 3 hours. What the hell is going on?" It's just it is like a whole 'nother level of anxiety producing, but as long as you can, you put it's just like anything else. You put in the reps, you figure out, like, how to soothe this little human, and, like, I am so much more confident in my momming now at 4 months postpartum than I was at 8 weeks postpartum, because at that point, I was like, "I literally don't know if I'm cut out for this." Like, this I she hates me. She hates me. I don't know what she wants, yeah, so it's crazy, but I think, and this is something that I'm so passionate about, and this is why I made my programs the way that I did. I made them with, like, longer form education with my coach, Amanda. Shout out to Amanda, she's amazing. Um, she we made videos basically talking about, like, what happens during pregnancy, what happens postpartum, the things that you wanna look out for, and myths that we wanted to bust. Because Lord knows there's a ton of information on, like, TikTok and Instagram, and even from your, like, doctor who is amazing, I'm sure, but sometimes they don't have the best, most up to date, like, exercise guidance, especially because it's really hard for yeah, you know this. Clinical practice is often, like, years behind, like, research findings. And of course, with pregnancy, it's really hard to do research because it's not ethical to do research in them. So it's a lot of like, okay, well, we're not sure, so we're just going to put like blanket super rigid expectations, and guidelines. But when you understand something, it's way harder to be afraid of it. So, like, when you understand your baby, it's way harder to be afraid of it. When you understand your body and, like, things that, are common, but aren't necessarily like a bad sign, or like hypertension. When I, did I mean, I knew it about it because of being a PT, but, just understanding a little bit more about like what causes gestational hypertension or like what they think causes it, just made me feel a little bit more, like, prepared to manage it. So yeah, I mean, that's like with anything. If you don't know what's going on, it's a lot easier to be fearful versus if you're prepared to deal with it, or if you have the right resources to figure out what's going on.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, it sounds like those resources are not TikTok and Chat GPT that way. There's a lot of interesting information out there, for lack of a better way to put it. I'm interested,
Yeah.
what are kind of some of the key myths that you feel like people tend to fall victim to a lot of times that you tend to debunk for a lot of your clients that way?
Yeah. Just like regarding exercise during pregnancy, in general, that core work is going to give you diastasis recti because pregnancy gives you diastasis recti. 100% of pregnancies will have diastasis recti, and that's good. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to carry full term. So that's one thing. Um, like, I don't know, lifting weights is dangerous during pregnancy, that kind of stuff. Like you can't run during pregnancy. Like it's completely dependent on the individual. And like I said, based on the symptoms and your body's preparedness, your risk tolerance, and just how it feels. Like if it feels like shit, you probably don't want to do it anyway. So those are some things. Let's see. Oh, you know what I really hate is like when someone is teaching when a PT, unfortunately, or like anyone is being taught like a core, like a deep core contraction, which is like deep core is like this huge buzz term now. Um, they are cued to like initiate with a Kegel, so initiate with a pelvic floor contraction. And, that can be helpful because there is a co-contraction between like the transverse abdominis and the pelvic floor. And that's a good thing because if there wasn't, we would peeing ourselves all the time when we sneeze or cough or anything like that. So there's a purpose for that co-contraction. There's a reason why they're kind of wired in our brain. But I don't love when people are, a PT is cueing someone, okay, Kegels on a table, flat on your back, whatever. Then they're like, okay, we're going to progress this to like a functional movement. Let's do standing next to the table with your hands on the table, body weight squats, Kegel at the top, hold it through the squat, and then unkegel at the top. Like that is literally the dumbest thing you could be teaching someone because your pelvic floor, just like your glutes, and like all the other muscles of your hip needs to lengthen relatively as you're descending into hip flexion and a squat and a hinge, all that kind of stuff. And you're actually going to cause problems if you are holding tension in your pelvic floor. Whether that is like a lack of like glute engagement because you literally like try to spread your cheeks, but also like squeeze your pelvic floor. It's really hard to do that. It's really hard to stretch the muscle. But also sometimes there that can cause dysfunction in that if you're trying to, holding a Kegel at the top of the squat is a lot easier than when you're changing, like after that amortization phase, like after you change directions, when there's like an impulse of increased pressure, that's oftentimes when people are going to leak. They don't leak at the top. They leak at the bottom when they're changing direction. And one of the reasons why that can happen, not the only reason, of course, is because they like had too much tension in their pelvic floor. So that's another just thing that I absolutely detest. And then, oh my gosh, this is like the worst one. One time I had a client who told me that her doctor, um, I don't know if she had like a really long labor or what, but her doctor told her that um her uterus, oh God, I didn't even remember what she said. Like her uterus was too tight. And that was why she like was having these issues. And like your uterus is it's not a voluntary muscle. Like she said that she was causing her uterus to be tight from exercise. And like, I mean, maybe like a stress, maybe she meant like stress. Maybe she meant like a sympathetic situation. I don't know. But at the time I interpreted it as her um provider was indicating that exercise was going to impact her smooth muscles, which I mean, I guess it can in some ways. Again, I'm hoping, praying that she meant because it was like a sympathetic situation, like her uterus was too tight, so she like wasn't going to labor. Um, but yeah, that's another one that drove me nuts. Oh, and then also when people are taught that their pelvic floor needs to be strong to push their baby out. Your pelvic floor needs to relax so that your uterus can push your baby out because that's how it works. Like, yeah. Anyway, it's crazy to me. And I know that not everyone wants to like understand their body or participate in their birth, which kind of blows my mind because like, thousands of years ago, we didn't have an option. You had to participate in your birth. Like your body will involuntarily make you participate in your birth. But I just think like if we just understood like what the purpose of your contractions are, what the purpose of what your uterus does, what your pelvic floor does, like how you can change your pelvic position, like your SI joint in your pelvis doesn't move a ton, but when you're pregnant, it actually moves a lot more, and it has to, because like you got to get something that's like this big. I mean, she was way bigger now than she was then, but like you have to get a baby through there. So things have to shift. And I just think if people went into labor understanding that, it would be a lot less scary. Like for me, like I understanding what my contractions were for helped me tolerate them better. Like obviously they still suck. Like that's the most pain I've ever been in. But like when you understand that the pain is because they're strong, which is because you're close to having your baby, like it's not as scary. It's like, wow, this is really cool. Like look what my body is doing. Like I'm not choosing to do this. This is I mean for me it was because Pitocin was doing it, but well, for most people it's that your body is ready and your body is ejecting the baby. So yeah,
Yeah.
those are a couple that come to mind.
No, absolutely. Those are all great. And just going back to your point on the pelvic floor side with the Kegel for a second. I had this conversation on the podcast recently with Rachel Selman, and the way we kind of dived into it and broke it down is like normally these are things your body doesn't think about. You're not thinking about, oh my goodness, I'm gonna go pick something up off the floor. I better cue my pelvic floor. They're not things that we typically consciously think about on the day to day. So if I go through someone from a rehab standpoint, teaching them to consciously think about it all the freaking time, what are they gonna do, right? I think to a certain extent in all of the rehab space, we tend to overcue. But I think
Yes.
this is one that we especially overcue. We almost teach this reliance or dependency on external feedback to know if we're doing something correct or incorrect. When in reality, I guarantee you, if you watch someone in the gym do a set of squats, don't be creepy, but watch them do a set of squats, then watch them do a second set. They probably move a little bit different. Their depth might be a little different. Each rep is not going to be perfectly identical. There's 1 degree differences here, there, wherever that make it
Yeah.
slightly different each rep. So why am I going to try and get someone to only move in one way when in reality their body needs to move in millions of different ways? And in relation to the pregnancy piece, it's probably billions of different ways. So it's
Yeah.
like, why am I going to restrict someone to only one way when in reality we need to go all over the friggin' place? So I
Yeah.
think
Yes.
that's so, so essential, but not
Totally.
discussed enough. And I mean, even with some of the different tech and gadgets, like, don't get me wrong, biofeedback can be a great tool at certain times, but I don't want people to become so reliant and dependent on a number or a bubble on a freaking app on their screen that they forget that they are meant to kind of go through this on their own and just naturally do it without that kind of feedback constantly.
Yes. No, could not agree more. And just like anything else, like you want to coach first. You don't want to, because I have people asking me all the time. They're like, "What do I do with my pelvic floor when I lift?" I'm like, "I don't know. Are you peeing yourself? Like, can you feel like, are you growing your glutes? Are you like able, like, does it look okay?" Because if, I mean, people like are, because pelvic floor, thank God, is becoming more like, I want to say mainstream. It's so crazy because it's like been there the whole time, right? But like, people are curious about it. People want to understand it. People are getting more passionate about it, which I think is amazing. Um, and I actually have a post coming out about this because I think it's, like, still so siloed, like, we're like, "Oh, are you a pelvic floor PT?" I'm like, "No, I'm a PT, and I understand the pelvic floor," because I think all PTs should understand the pelvic floor because it's literally, like, most of us are talking working with back pain, so we're usually doing core work, and if you're not working on, like, someone's breathing and their pelvic floor, at least, like, drawing attention to it and asking questions about it maybe, what the hell are you doing? Like, it's important. But anyway, what was I gonna say? Oh, yeah, like, you just don't wanna assume. You don't wanna put that into someone's head that they're doing something wrong. You wanna be like, "Hey, how does it feel? Like, what do you feel?" And, like, also, like, are you, just because 'cause you're postpartum doesn't mean you're gonna have incontinence. Like, I haven't had any incontinence. I mean, and maybe that's just me, maybe it's because of my preparation, maybe whatever, I don't know. But, like, just because 'cause you're postpartum doesn't mean that you're gonna have prolapse or incontinence or, like, issues with anything, and just because you are far postpartum doesn't mean that you're not. So, I think it's just, instead of just assuming, and this is the problem with people just Googling things or just like consuming on social media instead of like actually understanding that there's nuance with it, is that like it kind of depends. Go figure.
It's like the, like, golden rule in physical therapy. It always depends. It always varies, and to your point, like, there's a whole separate discussion that could be had about the pelvic floor that's not just specific to the postpartum population, right? Like, I can't tell you how many female runners I've treated that have come to me telling me that they pee themselves every single run. And it's like, wait a second, that shouldn't happen. But to your point, unless you have an understanding of the pelvic anatomy and functions and so on that way, you're not going to appropriately intervene. And I'm very, very open about this. I am not doing anything internal. I'm sorry, but I like to keep a license to practice.
Yeah.
So if there's issues, there's something called subjective questioning, which we do just to gather some information. It's kinda like the recon mission, right? About to crack the UAV out here and see what's going on. once we figure out what's going on, it's very easy to maybe refer them to someone like Megan, who might have a little bit of a different skill set or mindset or something that I might not have to offer this person. And I think that, if providers would do that stuff more often, I mean, that's how I do it with a lot of different things, not just pelvic, but like I'm not treating someone's TMJ. I don't know where to
Yeah.
begin with this thing. You know,
Right.
I can do enough to identify that something's wrong, but afterwards, I'm not the best at building the roadmap moving forward. And I'm okay to admit that. I'm okay to tap out and say, I don't need to know everything, but I do need to know enough to figure out what's going on, why it might be going on, and where we need to go from there. And I think if more people started to go with that kind of mindset, we'd be so much better off. And I'll take that a step further. That's not just going to apply to the pelvic population, but maybe even the pediatric population, infant, like you might have a 4-month old. You might know some different things that most people don't about development milestones and reflexes and all these crazy things. Shout out to the PT school for making me memorize all that stuff that I thought I'd never use. Here we
Yeah.
freaking are. So it's like, it's one of those things that even with the younger population, when they're 3 months old, 4 months old, 5 months old, there's certain things that they should potentially be able to do. Like there's a general age where babies start to walk and start to talk and so on that way. And if you don't know those things and you're not aware, it's like, hey, we need to find a way to kind of bridge that gap a bit, I think.
Totally. Yeah, you can't be an expert in everything. We talked about that on previous episodes, I think. But when it comes to pelvic floor, like the internal exam is very important, and I would say sometimes like mostly necessary for certain individuals, but for a lot of people, just the subjective for any injury, but the subjective can be so powerful. And then just habit modification can also be powerful because literally things like, okay, I had multiple clients because I tend to attract very, people that are very passionate about exercise. Like I've had multiple clients who were having issues with leaking during exercise, and I like looked at their programming. I wasn't, um, these were like actually one was a previous client, and then the other one was like one of my group athletes. So I wasn't like manipulating their training volume, and wasn't like seeing them for pelvic floor, or working with them for pelvic floor stuff. But they're both having incontinence, and we modified their training volume, and it went away completely in one case, and then almost completely in the other case. And that was just like literally just changing their training volume because it was too much. And one of them is obvious that it was too much, and the other one I was like, "Well, I don't know what the hell's going on, so we're just gonna see if changing your volume changes," and it did. So, that can be really powerful, or even something as simple as like, "Hey, did you change your pre-workout?" Like, "Oh, you're having 400 milligrams of caffeine before your workout and you're peeing yourself? Weird." It's like, that's always gonna happen. Like, I'd probably pee myself too. Um, so things like that, just, like, being aware of, like, bladder irritants or just your habits, because like, no one talks about their pooping habits or their peeing habits, but when there's a problem and you talk to the right person, it can come out that maybe what you're doing is not optimal.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And it's one of those things that until we start talking about it, how many of those issues have gone unchecked, undiagnosed because no one's comfortable enough to talk about it. And it's like, this is stuff that we kind of all have to do. So we might as well talk about it. It only hinders us to not bring these things up and have discussions like this. And the more we talk about it, the more we can move the needle in the right direction in the space, I think that way. And obviously, you're a phenomenal resource for all of those things. You mentioned a few times you've got programs, you've got education, you have all the things anyone could ever need and more out there online, Megan. For people who want to find out all about those things, where do they find you all at?
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And my postpartum program, we barely, by the skin of my teeth, finished it before Ella came because she ended up coming early. So yeah, basically, a lot of people find me on Instagram. My handle is at dr.megsy with an I dot dpt. And I also have a website that's linked on there too. And then my most popular program is the Form and Function training subscription, which we do have postpartum and during pregnancy moms in there. Some people, I would say, the volume probably wouldn't be appropriate, but everyone's a little bit different. So I do have people that continue during pregnancy. And then also I have a perinatal strength bundle, or you can buy the program separately. And that bundle is going to include the Barbell Before Baby, which is like a pre-pregnancy or during pregnancy program, and then Postpartum Rebuild, which is literally can be started from day one postpartum. It's very like gentle mobility work. And then we start more resistance training in week 6. And you obviously can kind of modify that based on like how you're feeling in your journey. And then I also just created a program that is based on what I am doing postpartum, which is not the same as postpartum rebuild because that tended to be a little bit like I didn't have enough time to do that. So I created Busy Mom Rebuild, which is literally supposed to be like 20 minutes a day. And it's just going to include like three different movements each day. So that's for people who like really don't have enough time. And all of those programs can be modified so that it's either appropriate for what your level that you're at in pregnancy or postpartum, or equipment, because a lot of time, modifications are going to involve like less barbells and things like that. And that's oftentimes what people have access to at home too.
Absolutely. No, I think that's all great. And I think it's so awesome that you have so many different resources for people out there and so many different programs that way. Because a lot of times I see people trying to force everyone into one program. And it's like, well, maybe that one program doesn't fit everyone. So I think it's amazing how you have so many different options and modifications and so on that way. I think you're doing it the right way by all accounts, Megan. And obviously, we've talked about a lot of different things. I know we could talk all day long about this stuff because you are such a wealth of knowledge. Is there anything that we missed or anything else you really wanted to cover today?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's interesting just being postpartum and feeling like, articulating words is kind of challenging. So if anybody does have questions on things that I said, because I either missaid them or was confusing, please don't hesitate to DM me. My DMs are always open and I love getting questions. I try to get to them pretty regularly. So yeah, I just love the community that I've built on both Instagram and with my programs. So really grateful for the opportunities to work with people. But yeah, other than that, just keep at it. If you're postpartum and you're in the depths like I am, just know that there's a community of support available for you, and also like it's gonna be okay.
For sure, for sure. And we'll link to everything from Megan's programs to her Instagram and beyond in the description below. And I think you even have TikTok as well, right? We got to put the TikTok in there.
I do, yes. TikTok and YouTube. I've actually been posting on there too. So
That's awesome. Do we have
yeah,
any
thank you.
videos of little Megan dancing with Ella, maybe? Maybe a Griff jumping in the background?
God, not yet. I'll schedule that one out. We'll see.
That's awesome. Well, we'll link to all of that in the description below, Megan. It is always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and insights, and so glad to see you doing so well.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.